The goal of this study was to provide a molecular atlas of esophageal cancer. There was some mystery surrounding esophageal cancer. One of them was the fact that although we knew there were two types of esophageal cancer, adenocarcinomas and squamous cell carcinomas, this is something that pathologists have recognized for many decades. What we didn't understand is whether these two types of esophageal cancer differed in the molecular changes that occurred to give rise to these cancers. And this is really important because currently these two cancer subtypes are combined in clinical trials as one group and treated as one group, but if the underlying molecular changes actually differ, it'd be really important to separate them out and target the specific molecular events in each type of cancer. So the Cancer Genome Atlas was designed to be a collaborative enterprise with many hundreds of scientists and clinicians around the country and indeed around the world to work together to provide a molecular map of each type of cancer. And we worked with a great group on this esophageal cancer project and put together a really comprehensive molecular map of the changes in esophageal cancer and found that these two types of cancer in the esophagus, the one up higher in the esophagus called squamous cell cancer versus those a little further down, adenocarcinomas, differed quite substantially in the types of molecular alterations that arose and occurred in these cancers. So that was a major finding, and it will provide us with some opportunities to perhaps develop new drugs and target therapies more effectively to these types of cancer. The other really important discovery that came out of this project has to do with the relationship between esophageal cancer and gastric cancer or stomach cancer. Some cancers of the top part of the stomach arise very close to these adenocarcinomas in the esophagus in anatomic location, right near the boundary between the esophagus and the stomach. And indeed, both of these cancers sometimes overgrow the boundary between the stomach and the esophagus. And clinicians, surgeons operating on these patients sometimes don't know whether they're dealing with an actual stomach tumor or an esophageal tumor. And so one of the questions was, do these two tumor types differ in their molecular makeup? They arise very close together, and also both behave somewhat similarly in terms of their origins. We know that both of these cancers are increased in people who have reflux disease, gastroesophageal reflux disease. And so we set out to see whether or not these two types of cancer differed molecularly and found that they're actually very similar. There's some very nuanced differences, but for the most part, they look like they're part of one continuum, one spectrum of disease that actually spans this anatomic boundary. So both of these advances will help us to organize patients more effectively into clinical trials going forward. It makes sense to group some gastric cancer patients, stomach cancer patients together with the esophageal adenocarcinoma patients. And it makes sense to maybe separately evaluate squamous cell carcinoma of the esophagus from adenocarcinoma of the esophagus. So we hope that these molecular maps will be used by clinicians and scientists around the world to more effectively design clinical trials for esophageal and gastric cancer patients, and will be used in the development of new drugs that can target these terrible diseases.